trying to get a handle on what the surfer was going to be in the movie. And the Marvel guy goes, well, no, the comic books. And the Fox guy cuts him off and says, we don't give a what you did in the comic books. This is a movie. We're going to do what we want to do.
Hey, everybody. How did both Iron Man and RoboCop, innovative masterpieces, how did they revolutionize their cinematic eras? Is there a deeper link between these two iconic characters than merely just body armor? And what was today's guest, the legendary makeup effects artist Bart Mixon, a little bit too afraid to ask superstar Tom Cruise on the set of The Grinch? Bart Mixon is a movie makeup maestro who doesn't just apply makeup, he applies truth serum. With a love for comic books as vast as his knack for preserving source material, he's the artist who reveals the beauty beneath the mask, both on screen and in today's interview segment. So, pull up a chair, get into the den, and hope you enjoy. But I want to get to Iron Man with you. Yeah.
Some of these, let me preface before we get to.
Yeah.
They have a thing what we call day checking in the film industry. So I've got a lot of friends that work on movies, and a lot of times they'll say like, "Hey, we need an extra guy for 2 weeks. Can you come help with whatever?" So I admit my portfolio resume looks very impressive, but like Ant-Man Quantumania, I think I worked on it 2 days because they had reshoots. They shot it in England. They did reshoots in LA, and a buddy of mine was heading up the reshoot crew.
Sure.
So he's like, Bart, comic books. This is one of the rare few times I'm not wearing a comic book t-shirt. Normally I have a Kirby, Marvel shirt on. So I ask away, but some of these, it might, more likely than not, it'll be like, well, I only worked on that for a week doing whatever. But anyway. So fire away.
Iron Man was one of the coolest superhero movies. I mean, in this day and age, if you're going to the cinema, you're probably going to go and watch a superhero movie. And if you're not doing it, the person next to you is. They're kind of like all over the place. But Iron Man was different. But Iron Man sort of ushered in Jon Favreau as a directorial force. It was really the movie that truly set up the tone and the world of the Avengers. I mean, I know that the Incredible Hulk kind of did that, but Iron Man really solidified the feeling of what was to come, I would say. And I think also something that's not often mentioned is that it was the movie that in a lot of ways gave us a Robert Downey Jr. that was firing on all cylinders. This was the new Robert Downey Jr., and it was him giving 100%, and I felt that he should have got an Oscar for that movie. I know that sounds weird. When you worked on it, regardless of how much you worked on it, but when you worked on that movie, did you get a sense that you were working on something special and big?
Well, it was hopeful because, we did know that this was the launch of the Marvel Studios. So prior to that, I'd worked on like the 2 Fantastic Fours and X-Men 3, and you had like the Sony Spider-Mans, and I think you might have had like a Ghost Rider and the Punisher and Blade and whatever. But those weren't Marvel movies, in that Marvel was not creatively, in charge of them. I knew that Marvel was finally calling the shots. There wasn't somebody above them that could shoot them down. Like on, as I like to tell this story, on Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, there was a meeting at Fox, and I wasn't there, so I don't know for sure what Fox executive it was. I want to say it was Tom Rothman, but I don't know for sure. But there was somebody from Fox. There was a Marvel guy who I think was probably Kevin Feige. And then there was a guy from Spectral Motion representing them. And they were just kind of conceptually trying to get a handle on what the surfer was going to be in the movie. And the Marvel guy goes, well, no, the comic books. And the Fox guy cuts him off and says, we don't give a fuck what you did in the comic books. This is a movie. We're going to do what we want to do. And it was that kind of, you can see that attitude in the X-Men movies and in the Fantastic Four movies. And it's like, that's why those movies weren't as good as they could have been. But starting with Iron Man, you finally, Kevin Feige was in charge, and he's a comic book fan. I met him on the first Fantastic Four. He was Avi Arud's assistant, and he was the only guy on set I could like talk comic books with, and stuff like that. So at least he remembers me from that. So, anytime I see him on a Marvel movie, I still get a quick, a couple of minutes of hello and, a little brief catch up. But finally you had the creative decisions were being made by comic book people, but it was being made by Marvel, and they had a vested interest. If Iron Man had failed, then that would have been it, because they had I think a $200 million loan that they were supposed to have made like 6 movies or something with, but they put it all into Iron Man. So it was literally a make or break situation. But like say with Fox, if the Fantastic Four fails, well, we still got all these other movies that we've made. So they've got stuff to defer the loss and whatever. So, I mean, Marvel literally put all their eggs in one basket. I was aware, and I have to assume that a lot of the other guys too were just aware that like this is different, because this was Marvel finally doing it. Now, who knew? I mean, Favreau had only done Elf and maybe Zathura before that point. So who knew that the guy who made Elf would have been a perfect fit for Iron Man? And likewise, the Russos come from Community, the TV show. So who knew like these TV comedy directors would end up being the best, Marvel directors, or even James Gunn, the guy from Troma, and wrote a couple of Scooby-Doo movies. And then, so you never, just because they don't have a superhero thing on their resume before that movie doesn't mean they're not the right guy for the job. But it could have been a disaster. So Downey was there in the Iron Man suit a couple of days that I was there, so I was like, wow.
Yeah, you as a comic book fan, and as a Jack Kirby fan, what was it like for you seeing Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark?
Yeah. Oh, it was great. I mean, the suit was beautiful. It looked, back then they actually had the entire suit, now, they're in those little motion capture things, and they might put like a chest plate or a piece of the helmet or something on. But at that time, he was in the complete costume, and the only digital stuff would be like, oh, he's like the shoulder piece, he can't raise his arm as high as we want it. So, okay, well, we'll take that off, and then we'll just digitally put that in later. So they were using as little digital as they could get away with, but I think by the end of the shoot, they realized that, well, he doesn't need to be in this whole thing. He can literally have the gray pajamas with just the chest and the head, so they kind of, I think, very quickly transitioned, learned what they could get away with. But it was, just as a fan, it was like, there's Iron Man. And I mean, it looked great. So no, that was certainly a happy time for this fanboy,
I'm sure.
So, wow. And again, and then at least when the final movie came out, it was a great movie. It certainly saved Robert Downey's career. I was going to say at that point, he couldn't even get arrested in Hollywood, but that was about all he was doing, was getting arrested in Hollywood. So I think Marvel appreciates what Iron Man did, or what Downey did for Marvel, and then Downey appreciates what Marvel did for his career, because he would not have been doing these Sherlock Holmes movies and whatever else, Dr. Dolittle and whatnot, had he not, had Tony Stark not jump-started, his, revitalized his career. I was working on The Grinch. Tom Cruise came by and visited the set one day, and the rumor at that time, there was talk of an Iron Man movie being made, and Cruise was supposed to be Iron Man. I don't think I had the courage to be like, are you going to really be Iron Man? But so he would have been an interesting Iron Man. But definitely it's Robert Downey. And at least I think the MCU is big enough. Like, they're coming out with Armor Wars movie in a couple of years, which is going to be, Rhodey. And Rhodey was Iron Man for a couple of years in the comics. So I think organically the whole MCU is set up to where you don't need to recast these characters. From a story point, they can justify Rhodey, War Machine, could be the new Iron Man, just like Sam Wilson is the new Captain America. In some respects, I think that's better than just like, oh, well, now we've got so-and-so. Like, I don't know that I want to see Iron Man 4 with Matthew Broderick as, Tony Stark or whatever.
Funny that you mentioned Matthew Broderick, because I think at one stage, many, many years ago, he was also rumored to be playing Spider-Man. I can't remember if that's actually...
Could be. I mean, he certainly has the right...
Peter Parker kind of...
The right build and stuff. I could see him as, like, whatever, however many years ago. Yeah, I could see him, because there was a James Cameron was trying to do Spider-Man at one point. I think Schwarzenegger, I think, was going to be the Sandman in it, which would have been really cool. But I have no idea who's going to be the Spider-Man, but I could see somebody like Broderick, back then.
I'd like to move from Iron Man to another Iron Man and speak a little bit about RoboCop, since you mentioned it early on. I know it was one of your earlier films that you worked on. Now, people are probably going to want to stone me to death for this, but I've always seen kind of parallels between RoboCop and Iron Man. Some of it's probably pretty obvious.
Right.
Guy gets injured, and through this injury becomes a cyborg, acquires these superhuman powers. But Iron Man sort of represented a change in the movie world. It was very innovative. But then again, so was RoboCop. Both of these movies were innovative in that they had done things that the movies before had not done. And you worked on both of these movies. And although it was only, I think, 20 years between RoboCop and Iron Man and RoboCop and now, kind of in movie years, it's almost like different ages of, and I wanted to hear what your reflection on that is. What is your perception on the way that movies have changed, and also the way that we kind of watch movies?
Right. Well, first of all, I want to throw in there real quick, you're mentioning the similarities between RoboCop and Iron Man aren't accidental. I remember I was in the van once on RoboCop, and one of the writers, I believe it was Ed Neumeyer, was riding. We're going to the set, and I was asking him, what his inspiration or where he got the idea for RoboCop, and he goes, originally I wanted to make an Iron Man movie, but we couldn't afford the rights, so I made up my own, version of basically his own version of Iron Man. So I know he's, Blade Runner was also, an influence on him, but so Iron Man is definitely in the mix. But let's see. It definitely. Like RoboCop at that time, practical was our only option. Digital barely existed, and what there was digital was, very, very crude. So that wasn't even on the table. Plus, it was a low budget movie, so even if digital effects, were an option, we wouldn't have been able to afford it. RoboCop definitely had to be all practical. Iron Man, particularly the first Iron Man, like we talked earlier, was kind of at that weird transitional phase where at the beginning he was in the full suit akin to RoboCop, and then if not the end of the movie, at least by the time they got to reshoots, it was the gray pajamas, and which makes for horrible behind the scenes photos. You look at these Avengers pictures, and there'll be somebody like the Visions in like a full suit, and then like Spider-Man, if he's in his Iron Spider suit, is in just the PJs. And movie making, it might even be relying too much on digital stuff now. But like you said, they did represent different ages, and RoboCop was probably like the peak of what was possible at that time, versus Iron Man was, I think, at an interesting transitional period. And then now it's just everything is so digital. Even like when we were on Civil War and we had the Black Panther and Spider-Man were on set, and they're like, well, we're going to, this isn't the final Spider-Man suit. We're just going to film with this, and then we're going to replace it all with digital later. Both good and bad. I think the bad thing with digital is it allows people to put off making decisions till later. Like when Ray Harryhausen, was doing his movies, he had to design the shots and they had to shoot based off his storyboards. And then a year later, he's doing stop motion. So, you had to make decisions and commitments and have a vision going into it. It's like a double-edged sword. There's amazing stuff that, they're able to do, in this digital age that we couldn't have done previously, either for just practical reasons or budgetary reasons, even though digital is expensive as hell anyway. But
hey everyone, that's not it from Bart Mixon and myself. In the upcoming episode, Bart will take us on a thrilling roller coaster ride through the world of big budget film productions. Get ready as he draws comparisons between the made-for-TV Spider-Man films as well as Sam Raimi's masterful trilogy. Plus, don't miss an unforgettable anecdote about the fuss Tom Cruise's ear caused on the set of Michael Mann's Collateral. It's a behind-the-scenes journey you won't want to miss, so keep those popcorn bags ready and stay curious as we venture deeper into the magic of movie making with Bart Mixon. Hope to see you there. Stay safe, stay happy, and most of all, stay horror. Gaze into the abyss.